Down to Orchard.
All right. If we could have Mr. Lockaby give us the resolution for financing
Do you want the presentation?
in the presentation, yes.
We're going to split this one up.
Yeah. Sorry, Katie's not here as well.
Yes, Katie is not here this evening, so we do have Chad up in the audience in case it's needed, but hopefully we can end up getting through this fairly judiciously and provide you answers and go from there. So if you will remember back when we left the last meeting, the assignment was to see how we could end up funding these projects and moving forward with those. And so there's the two projects that we're talking about. One is the emergency communications radio system, and the other one is the 911 center Reed Mountain Fire Department upgrades. And the communication system, $21 million. And the 911 center is $15 million for a total of 36. Now it's interesting and it's an anomaly. Not a comfortable anomaly, but it is that you would end up having a communication system and a 911 center and a fire department rebuild all at the same time. And then you also have a courthouse that is being built also. All of those are happening within just short amount of time, which is an anomaly for a locality to actually have that. So the funding option, as it had been brought to you, would have been to fund the full amount, the $36,194,692. Borrow that, if you remember. Some of you may have bad memories of this, but anyway, that was a memory. Radio project, 15-year term. The 911 center would be a 20-year term, approximately $3.1 million per year at a interest rate, just a given interest rate that I stuck in there at 4.5%. I suspect that we will be below that. However, for example purposes, that was what I ended up using. So the other option that we have looked at, and hopefully this is more palatable, would be to still have the $36,194,692. There has already been $6,766,682 paid from fund balance toward the project. This was for the radio project. So almost $7 million there. If you subtract that off of the 36, you're down at 29. And then if you ended up having an additional use of fund balance, that would be for now. We had looked at, in the February meeting, I think the number was maybe 4 million. So this is just a little bit more than that, a little north of that. Use of fund balance would be 4,428,000. And that gets you down to a borrow of 25 million. So the radio project still 15-year term, and the 911 center still 20-year term. And the debt service on that would be $2 million per year at 4.5% interest rate. So then if you look at a comparison between those, option one at 3.1 and option two at 2 million, you've got a delta of $1,100,000 to the good versus the funding of the full 36 would be funding of the 25 million. And the difference between that ends up saving you about $1,100,000 in debt service on an annual basis. So if you think about it, that the shortest term is 15 years for the radio project. So 15 times the 1,100,000 is over $15 million, almost $16 million. And then you would still have 5 years on the 911 center to pay off in the future. That would account for additional amount of savings that would be there. So you're probably looking at a total savings of between $16 and $18 million, just based upon this scenario, if you went with option two. So you may say, okay, sounds reasonable, but how much do we have in fund balance, and how are we projecting that out into the future? So in FY25, of course, we all know, and as Ms. Rotman and I spoke the other day, is fund balance is something that is a point in time, and it's not something that it's living, breathing, growing, or reducing as far as that goes. And in FY25, the audited unassigned fund balance is $42,223,606. So in FY26 budget, there was an approved fund balance usage of $6,289,440. That's up until this point. And then there's an anticipated usage of between 26 and 27 budgets, 4,141,000. So if you end up using this additional 4,428 out of fund balance, the projected FY27 fund balance would be somewhere in the neighborhood. And please understand that this is not science. This is projections, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 27,365 is where your projected fund balance would end up being. Now, one of the things that happens between now and then, of course, is what we would hope is that we normally end up adding to fund balance on an annual basis. And so would be the hopes that we would end up adding to this and having more fund balance than this. This would be sort of a floor to me as far as fund balance, and especially if we end up having a good budget that comes through this year, and as well as revenue collections that are on norm or on par with where we have been typically. So I think that this is really the floor for fund balance in FY27. There is no guarantee to that, however, but that's one of the things that we could all shoot for and try to be close to that. Also, just as a reminder, is that we still have the courthouse. We do not know exactly how much that will be as far as anticipated financing need for the courthouse to finish it up. I know the number 10 million has been floated. I suspect it will be somewhere a little slightly less than that, but who knows how much. And so that will be something to think about in the future as well. So I've been speaking about the first part of the discussion was about the additional borrow, and given a potential for $25 million versus the 36 million on the borrow. And then the second piece to this is the refinancing of the 2014 Public Safety Building Regional Jail. Now, this is debt, obviously, that Botetourt already owes, and this is not new debt. This is already on the books, and it is just like a home mortgage. If you've got that, it's the same situation. So the balance on that note is just under $7 million. And Christy Coy, which each of you have met her with PFM somewhere along the way, she is working on this, and Mike can give more info to it. But what Christy has said was that she's anticipating a savings for the refinancing. And if there is not a 3% savings on the net present value, then the financing would not take place. So this is an authorization for something that may or may not take place. However, if it does take place, it would end up being a savings. And so therefore it would be practical and logical to actually move forward with that refinancing. And the anticipated savings at the net present value of 3%, and it could even be more than that, is to save $42,000 annually until 2033, or approximately $252,000 in savings. It's not every day that you actually get to save $250,000 and somewhere in that vicinity. So this would be that day if you decide to move forward with that. So those are the thoughts. And if you have questions, be happy for Chad to answer those. Just kidding. But if there is something, be happy to entertain those questions.
I can have a couple of questions, as well as probably some of the board members, but you have a 15-year and a 20-year, and why did we choose those two different ones?
So, financing terms are based off of life of the asset that is being financed. So normally you end up having a real estate asset, of course, does not leave. It doesn't necessarily wear out as fast as something that you might be holding in your hand as a portable radio or towers or whatever that might be. And so you can actually get those kind of terms would be less for that kind of asset. So not to get into the weeds, but there's kinds of property. So that is, let's think of it as an automobile versus a home. You get a 30-year mortgage on a home, you get a 5-year, 3-year, 4-year note on your car, because the car will wear out. Hopefully your home lasts a lot longer. Same situation.
And the next question I had is, there's a floor that we should be having for our budget. And what is that floor?
Or are you speaking on the fund balance?
Yeah, the fund balance.
Fund balance, currently the policy is 25% of that. And if you end up figuring that at 25 million is where that would be currently. And that's the fund balance policy. That could be modified in the future if you choose to do so. But that is something that the board would have to take action to do to actually reduce that.
Very good.
With the projected balance, you would still be above the base of the 25% fund balance.
Very good.
So it's 25% of the annual budget or annual
Of the
revenues
expenditures.
of expenditures?
And Chad, seriously, if I misspeak, okay.
So we could reduce our spending and then we could have a smaller fund balance. Theoretically.
It's yeah, theoretically.
Any other questions for Mr. LaRue?
One question. Is there thank you. What the bond rates would be and when we might be able to know what that answer looks like?
So I will yield that to Mr. Lockaby. I think he has a schedule of the when these would end up coming in, as far as when the bonds are priced and how that happens, and give you a little more flavor to that.
Thank you.
If that might be the case. And
Absolutely. If I can take the opportunity, you're being asked to adopt a resolution, and this resolution says that I've explained certain things to you. So that's one of the things that I'm supposed to explain to you. So is it okay if I do that, Mr. Snyder and Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
All right.
if I might, before Mr. Lockaby, if you will, are there other questions for me? Otherwise, I will sit down.
I do have one question. So I may not have this, may not have the correct recollection, but I thought that at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, we had approved payments of something around $9 million towards these projects. So can you reconcile that for me with these amounts that are shown here?
So in essence, I think the number was 10. And what that was the 6.2 that you see up there. Oh, excuse me, wrong slide. It was the 6.7. Let's see, excuse me here. Brent, let me see here. It is the option 2. It would be the one before that. There you go. Okay, so Ms. Rotman, I think what we're referring to is what had already been paid, which was about $7 million. It was close to that. So this is 6.7 is what had been paid. And then if you added 4 to that, we were using large round numbers, 6 and 4 is 10. And that's would have been funding, paying for this in cash would have been $10 million. Is what, and so it's the addition, it's the combination of what's already been paid and what a projected possibility of payment was, which is 10, which right now we're actually looking at about 11 because this would be 6.7 plus the 4.4.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me? Be happy to.
This, just to verify, does keep our high bond rating all
Yes.
intact?
Yes,
Great.
it should not be any issue with that. I have spoken with Corbin Stone, auditor, and auditor extraordinaire with Robinson Farmer Cox. Each one of you know Corbin as well. And he was comfortable with this as an option, as long as you continue to just watch this very closely, but it should not cause any issues at this point.
I had one question. This may be more for Mr. Lockerbie. Since we have to have our application in before the underwriting, if the underwriting isn't the number what we want, can we still pull it, or are we locked in?
So what you're approving is the parameters of the deal, which is to say you're approving the absolute maximum amount that you would be willing to borrow. You are also approving the absolute maximum interest rate at which you would be willing to borrow. Those numbers, I think, are proposed to be $25 million in new money, up to $25 million in new money. The amount of refunding is, I believe it's like 6.4, 6.5 area is the total amount of the refunding, but we simply put 7 million as the not to exceed because it's going to be exactly how much it takes to be, which would be to say a total amount of $32 million would be the total amount of the borrow, although it would have different maturities based upon what you're doing with it. So we will know, there's a process that they go about going through the process. We need to deliver all of these documents to them by March 20th. We will get a preliminary debt service schedule the week of the 16th. So they go through a series of stages that leads up to them actually selling the bonds. First, they have, step back even further. What we have here is that you would be approving tonight a prime lease. And in that prime lease, you lease property, which in this instance is the Reed Mountain Fire Station and a whole bunch of radio and fire EMS equipment, as well as the jail, because the jail's part of this as well if there's a refunding, to the Virginia Resources Authority, which is an authority created by the state basically to buy up lots of little bonds and reissue them as one big bond and thereby save everybody money. So we lease it to them for $5 a year. They lease it back to us and we pay them the amount that it costs for them to pay debt on their bonds that they issued on our behalf. And so that's the normal way that counties issue debt today. Cities and towns do it a little bit differently for a whole variety of boring legal reasons. Counties normally do it this way. You sell a lease to Virginia Resources Authority or to an economic development authority, and then that authority goes and sells a bond and you make payments on the lease in the total amount of that bond. So that's the basic concept there. Virginia Resources Authority is going to assign all of our payments to somebody called a trustee, who then figures out who owns all of the little tiny bonds that get sold out and makes sure they all get paid what they're owed. And so that this resolution would be approving those three documents: the prime lease to VRA, the financing lease back to us that provides for us to pay the principal and interest on the bonds from the value of our lease, a deed of trust, which provides for the assignment of all of that money to the trustee who pays the bondholders. And finally, delivery of what's called a tax compliance agreement, which is an agreement that provides for us to do and not to do certain things that they're required in order for our bonds to be tax exempt. As you can imagine, if somebody doesn't have to pay doesn't have to pay income tax on the interest, that means we have to pay less interest for them to get the same amount of income at the end of the day. So we like to keep our bonds tax exempt whenever possible, and we have to sign a tax compliance agreement that provides for us to do that. In any event, as I said, when they sell the bonds, that happens in a series of stages. So the first stage is that VRA develops a very long document called a preliminary offering statement, or POS. And yes, we snicker about that a little bit until we get over that. And that is distributed to potential purchasers of the bonds, investors. And they give some indication of what they might be willing to give as an interest rate in order to buy that bond. And you buy a bond at an interest rate. And that's what we should get the week of the 16th. The week of April 13th, we will get a far more certain debt service schedule, which will be based upon the underwriter actually pricing in with bondholders or with potential bond purchasers what they're willing to purchase it for. And that's based upon the final offering statement. And then finally, on April 28th, that's the bond sale date where everything is locked and set in stone. And then we actually are scheduled to close on May 12th, which means that that's the date that all of the money would be deposited into what we call our SNAP account, which is sort of a savings account that reinvests our money in order to basically get as much money as we can through having our money sit there and be lent out to other people. So you can imagine that if you can buy, if we can borrow money at 3.5% or 4% tax exempt, and then you can go buy bonds in, I don't know, Ford Motor Company at 5% and get to keep the spread. That's nice. And as long as you're careful about it and don't do too much of it for too long, you can do that. It's called arbitrage. It's pretty great. Makes you an extra couple $100,000 during the process of the deal, which helps.
Okay, thank you.
So now proceed on with anything else that you need to go over with this.
I'm glad I can talk about this all afternoon if you want, let me. But really what you need to do is approve this. If there's going to be savings, we will refinance the 2014 debt. If there's not, we won't. Borrow $25 million. Your worst case scenario is you're paying 5%. It's probably less than that, but we'll be able to give you a much clearer indication after we have the preliminary debt service schedules come in on the week of the 16th.
Any other questions for our council? If not, we have number one, options 1 and option 2. We have a motion. Do I have a motion for option 1 or option 2?
I'll make a motion for the 25.
Okay, the option 2. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now for the agreement to the resolution. Do I have a motion for the agreement for this resolution?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This presently concludes our meeting. Unless the board has any other questions. If not, does anybody move for adjournment?
So move.
I'll second that one too.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
Thank you.